discussion on the 6th Africa Climate Talks and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, on the topic, Bridging Climate Action and Sustainable Development in Africa. Climate change remains a pressing challenge, and the 6th Africa Climate Talks provide a platform to address key solutions for achieving the SDGs. Tune in as experts, policymakers and stakeholders dive into discussions on climate resilience and adaptation strategies, the role of the youth and innovation in sustainability, policies shaping Africa's green future, and collaborative action towards achieving the SDGs.
This message is brought to you by African Network of Parliamentarians on Climate Change, East African Legislative Assembly in collaboration with the Office of the Prime Minister and Uganda Parliamentary Forum on SDGs with support from WaterAid Uganda.
Thank you for following all our programs and all our work in terms of news, programs, and whatever we prepare and bring forward for your consumption. Our target is for a beautiful Pearl of Africa, Uganda. My name is Michael Jordan Lukomwa, and we are coming in with a special discussion this morning where we are focusing on climate. And the main focus is on bridging climate action and sustainable development in Africa. Now, there is an arrangement called Africa Talks on Climate, and it is an event that is coming just in a few weeks or days to come. We are going to get to know more, plus something to do with the SDGs, still in that line of climate, especially in terms of how to curb climate change and the effects and impact of climate onto human beings and the well-being of mankind, especially on the African continent, our beautiful African continent, and of course to protect you and I. So this morning we are having a discussion, a special one, in line of bridging climate action and sustainable development in Africa, and we're going to have it just here. I have two guests who will tackle different things, different areas in the discussion, because each one of them falls in a certain category. Join me, welcome Honorable Amongin Jacqueline. She's a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, and she's also a former MP of Katakwi, Kumi? Ngora, but still in that Teso area. Yes. You're most welcome. She now represents Uganda in the East African Legislative Assembly. Then Mrs. Joyce Mpalanyi Magala. She's the country director of WaterAid Uganda, and she's also going to be with us here. You're most welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Let me start with a general look at whatever we are going to discuss. Before we go, this broadcast is brought to you by African Network of Parliamentarians on Climate Change, East African Legislative Assembly in collaboration with OPM, and the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on SDGs with support from WaterAid. So when you see my guest, you can just get a representation of those entities. I'll start with you, Mrs. Mpalanyi.
Yes.
When we talk of climate, what do you think is the state of climate and all that comes with it in Africa, Uganda and Africa currently? The state of affairs in as far as climate and sustainability and all that is currently.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about climate change. Everything in our life depends on climate, and the weather patterns that we see are a result of the climate changes. In Africa and globally, we are experiencing a lot of changes as far as the climate is concerned, and we are realizing extreme weather conditions. Yes. Which may present in forms of floods, in forms of prolonged droughts, in forms of a lot of devastation to our crops because the climate has changed. And specifically, I want to refer to a report that was written very recently on water and climate risks, 2024, and its risks for the urban perspective. The report says, for example, Kampala, where we are seated right now,
Yes.
we saw the most recent floods in the past 1 or 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Just a week.
just a week ago. That alone can define for you what climate change impacts
Actually,
can really
it's a week
be.
ago, and we are waiting any time
Yes.
because the rain season is around.
That is a typical example of what climate change really means. Kampala City is one of those 20 cities that have been predicted that will really suffer from prolonged droughts and also a lot of flooding. There are so many causes and issues and factors that are leading to these extreme weather changes and patterns.
Okay.
When they happen, you just think it's just a flood, but it's not just a flood. We are talking about children risking lives. We are talking about property being washed away. We are talking about our economies being washed away. We are talking about diseases, the disease burden increasing. And what are the factors that are leading to this? You can already see, if you look at Kampala as an example, we've overdeveloped the city without proper drainage systems. We've cut all the trees. I remember they used to say Kampala is built on 7 hills. It went to 21 hills. But now when you look at all these hills, the hills are not green anymore.
Yes.
The trees have been cut. Our urban planning has a lot of challenges. So the challenge with water, it will always find its way. So that is what we have to really be assured of.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Honorable, what is your view about climate? I want us to start with the general picture so that whoever is watching gets to be on the same page with us. What's your view in your perspective as a leader? You have been a leader locally, now at regional level. What is your view of climate and the changes that we are facing? Like Ms. Mpalanyi is putting it, some are extreme.
Okay, thank you, Jordan, and I would like to appreciate Mrs. Mpalanyi for giving us that brief.
Yes.
But I would like to echo my voice in regards to the situation of climate, not necessarily in Uganda alone, but in the global context, in the African region, and at the East African region.
Yes.
Today we are basically here talking about the upcoming climate talks and the SDG forum that is scheduled to commence actually on 7th here in Uganda.
Yes.
But globally, you can now not talk about any challenge that the whole world is facing if we do not mention climate change. Because climate change affects our modus operandi, our day-to-day lifestyle, it affects our health sector, it affects our education sector, it affects our agricultural sector. So, in a nutshell, climate change affects all our day-to-day lifestyle. So that's why it's very imperative for proper planning when any institution or any government is planning for the people. There is need to have to mainstream climate change in its modus operandi.
Give it a priority.
Give it a priority.
Yes.
And that means we are talking about floods, apparently. In the African context, because I'm also Secretary General of the African Network of Parliamentarians on Climate Change. Okay. So we bring parliaments from all over the 54 countries together, advocating for issues of WASH and climate change. But you realize that in the whole of Africa, 54, we would say 55, but right now we talk about 54 countries.
Yes.
Emission from Africa is just 3.6, so we are less than 4% in terms of the emission today. Global emissions, what we contribute to the global emissions.
Yes.
So that means there are those who emit the highest volumes. And number one is the United States of America, and then the EU, and then China. Those are the 3 global emitters. So Africa just emits less than 4%. Although globally Africa faces the highest impact in regards to climate change.
How again?
Because when you emit emissions, when we emit globally, the impact doesn't matter whether the emissions come from China or from Europe or from America. We suffer equally, but it's even worse for Africa because one, we have not adapted, and then two, we have not put in place frameworks or technologies for the people to adapt to climate change. And then three, it is a new scenario whereby these floods used not to be there. I was born in the late 80s, and we do have rains no more, and when it's dry season, it's dry, and that's it. But this time around, my village where I come from Agu village in Ngora. You can find the whole village is water. Everything is affected. All crops are affected, households. So there's nothing that remains, including the cows or so everything is affected by floods. And you know that we've had a long spell of drought.
Yes. Not
Not only in Uganda, it was all over. East Africa was even worse. Kenya, animals were dying, everything, because of the drought. So when we are talking about the escalating impacts of climate change, we are facing it as Ugandans, as Africans, and we must find solutions. Despite the fact that there's always a game that the other global emitters must. We've had different negotiations at the different climatic conferences, COPs. We are now going to COP 30, that is going to take place in Brazil. We as African negotiators and African legislators, we are saying, let the global emitters pay. The polluter pay principle must be adhered to. Last year when we were in Azerbaijan, we failed to agree.
Why?
So because the global emitters, whereas the Africa, the low developed countries and the island states were pushing for a particular amount towards the climate finance, these global emitters were like, no, we are giving this, so they just surrendered any amount. But these talks continue as we continue meeting annually on talking about climate change. But let's come back to our context as Uganda.
Yes.
Uganda, we are at a disarray. When you look at, I come from the east and I pass Bugisu when I come to Kampala. So Bududa, you've heard of the incidences that have happened in
almost
Bududa.
Every year.
So when people are displaced because of landslides, people, that means their education system is affected, their livelihoods are affected,
no more roads,
their
no
food security is affected, and everything else, including access to limited resources, including water. So that's why it's very important, even for a country like Uganda, when we are doing the planning, when policy statements are being presented to Parliament, there is a need to ensure that the climate change is mainstreamed in all the other sectors.
Yes.
Because it is not now
whatever
about,
idea that comes up,
yes,
this should be a serious consideration.
because now it's not about a sectoral issue. This is an issue that cuts across all our sectors. The good thing, in the previous parliament, in the 9th parliament, we were able to come up with a climate change bill, and which was enacted, assented to by the head of state, and now as Uganda we have a climate change law. And this can be different from other countries because out of the 54 countries I'd mentioned about, only so far as 8 have come up with climate-related laws. That Kenya was the first, followed by Uganda, and we hope that other countries will follow course because we are climate change, you cannot address it single-handedly. It's not an issue that you can handle in silos. It has to be something that can be handled together. Nigeria should be doing this, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, so that we are talking about a harmonized approach.
Okay.
And of course now, as you realize, we're talking about wash. Water, the diseases that are come out of poor sanitation and hygiene, when there are floods, I stay in Machindi. And when I was driving to Kampala during that time of rain, heavy floods, you find that people were swimming in houses. everything destroyed. So when we're talking about accessibility to sanitary situation, including the amounts that a country or any government can spend in regards to poor sanitation and hygiene,
which is a
result of flooding, it's huge. So the more we try to come up with action areas for communities to adapt, for initiatives to take place that can promote climate, then that would be good for a country like Uganda. And there is a saying that we must act locally but impact globally. Any simple action that one does has an impact on the global context. So we are talking about the carbon markets right now. Carbon markets, they are saying, okay, this was something that was agreed at the United Nations Convention, negotiation of parties. And then we are saying that let's do carbon credits. Carbon credits to allow those with huge farms, for example, in Africa, they have vast lands, to do afforestation, so that at an opportune moment, someone can benefit from planting trees rather than cutting, and the person is paid. But even when you look at the carbon market scenario right now, we do not have existing policy frameworks in place. A regulation has to be put in place to enable effective monitoring, and so that our people are not cheated.
To guide all the operations in that line.
Of the land.
I'll get back to you, Honorable.
Yes, thank you so much, Jordan.
Yes. Now, Mrs. Magala, Mrs. Mpala.
Mrs. Magala.
Mrs. Magala. Our apologies. Now, we have now taken a picture of climate change and whatever that comes with it. We want to look at climate resilience and adaptation strategies. In the first place, what are these? Before you explain to us how they are engaged in order to curb the situation.
Okay, thank you very much. When you really want to tackle the effects or impacts of climate change, you have to come up with policies, strategies and guidelines, as Honorable has said. But this is not something that is only done in one day. You have to really come up with approaches that really go down deep into the communities to understand what the problems are. So you'll find that we have what we call the civil society organization. The civil society organization includes international NGOs, local NGOs, local CBOs, and local organizations. These are very fundamental in making sure that they work, one, with government, to make sure that we have very clear policies and strategies that will enable us to really be able to tackle the climate issues. How do the actions come around? The actions can only come if you have very proper guidance on the do's and the don'ts. So NGOs and the civil society are very instrumental in going down to the communities to identify what are the levels of vulnerability. Who is vulnerable to these floods? Who is vulnerable to the droughts? What is causing them? What are the local solutions, such that the communities themselves can adapt to the changes that are required to make sure that we curb on the factors that are leading to the climate change. So as planners and programmers, we act from an informed point of view. So this is what we call as risk-informed planning, so that we really address those critical issues that where the floods are coming from. These are issues to do with if forests are being cut down. What do we need to do? The communities themselves need to understand what they need to do to make sure that they preserve and conserve the environment. So that takes into consideration afforestation, reforestation, and stopping people from encroaching on the wetlands, because all these actions are leading to all these climate change impacts. They are nature-based solutions. that we are really trying to do, and those are some of them: the reforestation, the wetland conservation. People need to be taught, people need to be helped to understand that they shouldn't encroach on the wetlands, they shouldn't cut the wetlands, they shouldn't settle in the wetlands. Then we have what we call community-led adaptation. With the community-led adaptation, I'll give an example of the Mpologoma catchment, which is in eastern Uganda. Yes. And this is a project that is being run by the Ministry of Water together with Water Aid, and it's covering 11 districts. An assessment has been done to make sure that we protect the water sources, where the water is coming from. Because we just enjoy the water from the taps, but all this water, they are water resources, they are water bodies, they are water sources where the water is coming from. Once these water sources are not properly protected, and the human activity tampers with where the water comes from, then the wells will dry. We will not be able to receive the water. So we have to protect the water source catchments. People settle on the hills and then they cut all the trees and forests, so that ends up impacting on our water. And you know very well, water, sanitation and hygiene are very critical if you're really to address climate change, because it's our actions that are leading to the drying of wells. If you don't protect the wetlands, you will not be able to really enjoy, we won't have the fauna, flora, and the ecosystems that we have.
So what is failing us to score those goals? Because as you outlined them, they sound very easy things that we can just share the information and do. What is failing us?
I think there are a number of factors. One of them is collaboration. Do we collaborate enough? We have the private sector, we have the government, we have the NGOs, and we have the communities. We have roles and responsibilities in the different line ministries. What is the role and mandate of the Ministry of Water and Environment, for example? And this does not only apply to Uganda, it cuts across Africa. We have a lot of commonalities. So we need to understand and be able to promote the roles and responsibilities. Who is in charge of the wetlands?
Should we say each one of us is may not be playing their role in their different capacities?
Yes, there is a lot of duplication in the roles and responsibilities. There is a lot of money that is really compromised in the duplication of services. So we need to coordinate better. For example, if Honorable comes from the eastern region, who are the collaborators there? Who is really promoting climate resilient water and sanitation in the region? We need to get to the round table so that we can agree with the communities, with the district local governments, and with the national stakeholders what is best suited for an area. And as Honorable was talking about the climate change talks that are upcoming, what is the role of the different countries? We have the transboundary water resources. So how are we managing all these water resources to make sure that there is, they can stand the test of time? We can be able to share these resources so that our children and grandchildren also understand how we can maintain these water resources.
We are so lucky Honorable is here. But I want this to come from you. We talked about the different people that have the different roles to play in their different capacities. Honorable represents the people at the center of everything here on this set. Do you think they are playing their roles right?
I think they are
playing... all her colleagues, right from LC1 to the president. Do you think this team, because they are a team from LC1 to the president, all those colleagues of hers, do you think they are playing their role right in as far as curbing climate change impacts is concerned?
I think all of us are trying. That is what I would really say. We need to triple our effort. Why do we need to triple our effort? When we look at the policies, are the policies really very user-friendly to address why people are encroaching on the wetlands? We need to find out, why are people doing what they are doing? Is it an issue of income? if there are incomes, what incentives can be put in place to make sure that people do not encroach on the wetlands, but they have alternative sources of livelihood. That goes to a different ministry. If it is Ministry of Agriculture, what role is Ministry of Agriculture supposed to do in terms of helping people to come up with the drought-resistant crops? And what modern farming methods are they supposed to use?
Mrs. Magala, you are denying me your observation. Do you think these people are playing their roles?
They are playing their roles, but we need a lot that still can be done, especially when you look at the biggest challenge. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough funding. If you, for example, you want to develop water and sanitation and build climate resilient water sources, you need money. If this money is not provided, if it's not planned for, if it's not budgeted for, then we'll end up with people doing shoddy work. Once the toilets are built, once the water systems are built, they cannot stand the test of time. They cannot stand the floods. So we need to really advocate for budget allocation. We are here to request our government to increase on the budget that is being allocated to water and sanitation development so that we can have climate resilient water and sanitation facilities. We need funds to build the capacity of the district local governments where the action takes place. If we don't have, if the engineers cannot go to monitor what is happening in the sub-counties, how will we be able to address climate change? By the time they are going there, the forests have already been cut.
That's how we shall keep policies on paper and they cannot trickle down to the ground. We
need to disseminate these policies. All of these activities require money. You said they are simple things. They are not simple things. They are things that require very effective planning. They require very effective governance. How is the money utilized, even the little money that we have? How is it being utilized? So we really need to make sure we hold people accountable for the communities should be accountable for their environment. The leaders should be held accountable to make sure that the communities are doing the right thing. The leaders have to be accountable. All of these are forms of governance and social accountability. So what is the role of the government? We have to make sure there are resources provided for all these processes to make sure we sit on these round tables, people are educated, in fact, communities.
Not just resources, but enough resources.
Enough resources. Enough is relative, but I think what we need, let's put in the basic minimum, you know, whereby we are able to educate people on the challenges of the floods that we are seeing now. When we see the floods, a common person will not understand that it's because all the hills, the trees have been cut, because all the hills, they are now buildings, the water doesn't have anywhere to go, so that is why it's ending up washing up the businesses, washing up the property. All of this is education and awareness raising that is required, and that is what mostly the civil society organizations do, to talk with the people, to debate with them, to identify the solutions and to be able to come up with those solutions that can help us to really address all these issues.
Honorable, I think this is where you need now to come in.
Yes.
You are representing all the leaders from L1 to the president, our government and governments now.
Governments.
In the regional and global sense. Are you guys playing your role right? Because what Mrs. Magala's point is that each one of us in your small or big capacity, what you're supposed to do it like in double. If it is me in the media, if I need to disseminate information, I should do it times 10. You people that allocate resources, put up policies. We're going to talk about policies somewhere. And do you really do it in double? And if you were, would we see people dying in floods and things like that?
Okay, so to begin with, I would like to say that, okay, to some extent, I don't know whether I will put it to the large extent or to a smaller extent, but I want to say to some extent, some leaders are playing their roles, and some leaders may not be sure, because Previously, I went to Makerere University and I did environment. That's my first degree before I did law. But previously, people used to think that environment issues of climate change are issues of those who have done those particular disciplines. So everything would be just left to NEMA, to probably Ministry of Water, and that's it. And maybe a few civil society organizations coming
or
up.
agencies like NARO and whatever.
Yeah,
And
UNEP or forestry, such agencies. But of recent, I think people in leadership positions have woken up and realized that, oh, this is our issue. Because any issue that affects the people automatically becomes your issue,
Concern.
your concern. And definitely when people are displaced from a village X and you're a leader in that village, then you're automatically forced to understand the situations. So that's why I still insist that it's to some extent. And I wouldn't blame the other ones who have not taken any step, because one, first of all, leaders are at different levels, like you mentioned earlier, from village up to the regional level. Now, I would take credit that when I was in the Parliament of Uganda, we at least we came up with a climate change law, which was assented to. It's an act of parliament now that guides our climate engagements in Uganda. Once there is an enactment of a law in place, that means prioritization of government also follows what is already being, the policies that have been put in place. So for Uganda, I would say, yes, we've done a great job. But now the issue is, how do we move that, moving from policy to action?
Exactly.
Moving from laws to implementation. It means we must prioritize, despite the different competing priorities, we must put in context that climate change must be mainstreamed in all sectors and budgeted for in the different votes that are presented to Parliament, because everything is done in Parliament. Everything is done in Parliament, so prioritization of votes in regards to climate change must be a vote either on health, because we're talking about sanitation and hygiene, that is under Ministry of Health. A vote on water and environment, issues on the Ministry of Water and Environment. A vote in Ministry of Gender. Those votes that have climate change must be hyped. That's my thinking. Then two, we must popularize the challenge that we have to the other local person, because the president of every village in Uganda is an LOC1.
Yes.
So if a LOC1 is informed, if the local councils of the different councils are informed, then definitely you expect the whole population to be informed. Now, the attitude of our people. We are working on the transboundary water program in the East African Parliament.
Yes.
And for us, we are trying to come up with 2 bills on transboundary water protection and management, but also a bill on ending single-use plastics. Because apparently you realize that our water bodies are affected, because not only our water bodies, the marine life and our lives are affected because of the human activity. So we use all these bottles, all this plastic stuff, and we just go and deposit in Lake Victoria. That's obviously wrong.
This morning I was driving on my way to work. KCCA is trying to clean the Wise channel.
Yes.
But the heaps of what they have collected from the trench.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And then we have, I want to give a case for Uganda. I know Rwanda has done some progress in terms of this, but for the case of Uganda, someone can be just driving his car or her car, after drinking water, just opens the windscreens and throws the bottle out. It is to whom it may concern. So my thinking is that we must put in place regulations to regulate people, because our actions affect our environment.
Yes.
Why would you use a plastic and surrender it on the roadside? Make the cities filthy.
The wind blows it into the trench.
The wind just blows it to the trench. People collect garbage and then at night they go and surrender it at a certain wetland. So this is not how a city is supposed to be managed. And then we're talking about the challenges that we are facing apparently. I want to appreciate the president. He has been a #1 champion in terms of people vacating the wetlands. But I think this has not been sustainable, especially in the urban setting, like Kampala, for example. I would want to see a situation whereby government puts in place a sustainable mechanism. There are those people who have been in wetlands for the last, maybe those wetlands, even if we are to talk about wetlands, almost the whole Kampala is a wetland. But how do we protect these areas that have not already been encroached by human beings? Because you find there are these wetlands where people were encroached 50 years ago. KCC has been collecting taxes. URA has been collecting taxes from them. And now government wants to come and say, okay, get out of these wetlands. For me as a person, I would think the first measure would be to protect those wetlands that are already not encroached. Then we look at those wetlands that were encroached some time back. How do we deal with these people in a smart way to make sure that in a phased manner, they are able to exit? That would be very sustainable. But in the event that we just do haphazard, the president has been very clear that wetlands must be vacated. That is already a directive. So the processes of ensuring that all the other wetlands that we have in the country are not encroached should be one. Plus, districts passing district ordinances across the 100 and plus districts that we have. Yes. No one should encroach wetland. And then
with penalties.
With penalties. Even when you throw a bottle, like in Rwanda, one time I pretended to be throwing a paper. The community was just upon me. And me, I had my paper in the bag. I wanted to really see whether really
how alert everybody is.
Everyone was alert. Everyone came. Hey, they were speaking Kinyarwanda. Hey, what's your problem? Blah, blah. Why are you throwing the paper here? So that is the alertness we need, not only in country, but in the whole of East Africa. So we are looking at the single-use plastic ban. So that if Rwanda has banned plastic,
yes,
when you're coming to Uganda, because we are now talking about an East African community, and indirectly you are addressing issues of water, but also you are addressing issues of climate change, but also protecting livelihoods because we depend on the fish from the lakes.
Sanitation.
We depend on, yes, sanitation. We are addressing so many issues when we do that. And then when you're going to Kenya, the same thing, South Sudan, the same thing, Somalia. So you find that is going to be, it would be very harmonized. So, but before we do this, because at the East African community level, when we are doing laws, they must be assented to by all heads of states of the various member states. So, but before we do that, we do a lot of engagement with the different stakeholders. So the attitude of the people that we represent must first of all be addressed, because people think government is the people in position. But government is people and those in leadership. If you do anything wrong, it affects directly the operations of government. So we must work on the attitude, work on the addressing the gaps that are there in terms of legislations and what needs to be done. And then especially working with civil society like Water Aid. I used to be the chairperson of Water, Sanitation and Wash Forum in the Parliament of Uganda for 10 years before I joined the East African Parliament. I have worked closely with different stakeholders, but especially Water Aid in regards to capacity building of members of parliament and other stakeholders, including the chairpersons of the different districts in ensuring that they bring issues relevant to water, sanitation and hygiene in their respective district local governments. Okay. But this must not be a one-off. As you are aware, leaders change. I came to parliament, that is in the 9th parliament. We have 10th parliament, 11th parliament. If you are to track the leaders at the parliamentary level alone, 80% drop every 5 years. Yes. So this must be a continuous action.
Those
to
that
ensure
should just take forward.
It must be that even during the induction of local governments, LOC ones or members of parliament, climate change must take key priority so that when they are legislating, they know that, oh, these are the issues that we need to be focusing on besides our interests.
Tell us about the African Network of Parliamentarians on Climate Change and what exactly its role is.
Okay, so this network brings all members of parliament who are passionate about climate change to advocate for climate-related issues in the different parliaments, national, regional, and at the continental parliament. So as members of parliament, our key objective is to ensure, to make sure that by 2030, every parliament in Africa has enacted an enabling law to enable the planning of those governments in regards to climate change. Because without laws, then they are doing things in their own way. Most countries do not even have policies related to climate change. And then we are also advocating as a network for the global emitters to ensure that they adhere and fulfill the pledges that they commit to during the annual conferences of parties on climate change. But most importantly, we are working closely with the African group of negotiators to ensure that what they really go and negotiate, because eventually they are technocrats. In Uganda, they are from Ministry of Water and Environment, every country. But eventually, the ministers are the ones who adopt these documents, and then heads of states probably. But these people must reflect the interests of the people that they represent, so that negotiation is just not negotiation on your own, but you're negotiating on the interests of the people of Africa. So that's how this network works, and we have members in each and every parliament in Africa. With an executive board and everything, yes.
Mrs. Magala.
Yes, please.
We're going to tackle collaborative action towards achieving the SDGs. Make our viewer understand what this all is about, and before we dig into it.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, if we are even talking about sustainable development goals, these are goals that we committed to as through the United Nations, and they are 17 goals, which include water, handling poverty, education, and so many others. But what I really want to emphasize is the importance of WASH, water and sanitation hygiene, that cuts across all the 17 sustainable development goals. And remember, we said this should be achieved by 2030. So we are only 5 years away from this commitment. So for me, I'm asking myself, what have we done? Are we almost there? What kind of collaboration do we need? We've already talked about policies, guidelines, and strategies. We need to co-design these policies. For example, if it is a water and sanitation policy, have we consulted with the different stakeholders? What are the views, what are the opinions, and what is it that is going to help us to deliver sustainable water and sanitation? We've committed to drinking water, with the quality of the water. We are talking about affordability. Can people afford to pay for this water? Can people afford, is the water reliable? There are so many different parameters that we come up with for water. If it is sanitation, is it safe sanitation? Is it shared sanitation? Is it clean sanitation? These all are tied up in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we are saying, let NGOs like WaterAid, like USNet, be able to really influence the policies. Let us be co-designers to these policies, because we are down on at the grassroots, and we know what is really affecting or what is happening at the community. We gather it, and then we co-design policies that can best address the needs of the communities. These policies have to be disseminated at all the different levels. So we don't want these policies to remain on the shelves. When we have policies, we have a direction on the kind of programs that we are supposed to implement. So we are saying, can we have joint implementation of programs? It's not just about Uganda. What can we do co-jointly within the East African region? What can we do at the African region that can really guide us on our water and sanitation implementation? So we need to collaborate with the different line ministries. That is very important. What does the Ministry of Health bring onto table? Because very soon you'll hear about a cholera task force because of the floods. But do we really have to wait for this to happen? These are things that we really need to make sure that we already plan, we have proper drainage channels, we have proper public toilets that are well maintained, even by the private sector. That is collaboration. So when you talk about capacity building, we have growing populations, new populations every other time, new leaders coming up every other time. These need to really be sensitized on water, sanitation, hygiene, and its implication on health. Yes. Then when you look at the advocacy is very important because we cannot do things alone. We need to work with the different partners, their alliances.
There needs to be a voice.
We need a collective voice to say we need money to be able to develop climate action plans. Now, if you ask yourself, even here in Uganda, how many districts have climate action plans? You'll find that probably there are none. And that is one of the gaps that even as Water Aid we are trying to fill. We are coming up with a water climate action plan for Mbale district where we've been working. So if we have these plans and they are well thought through, they are funded or financed by the different stakeholders, then the actions will be developed. So we need joint implementation, we need co-designing of policies, we need to advocate so that we can be able to access resources that will allow us to curb on the soil degradation, on the cutting of trees, but also to make sure that the communities are held accountable. I heard one time in the media saying we need WASH to be a cornerstone for climate change policy and not just an afterthought. So you can really underscore the importance of water and sanitation. You cannot talk about climate change and you don't talk about water and sanitation. So we need technologies that can advance sustainable water supply. In order for us to come up with these innovations, new things, they need money. They need to be tested. We cannot always remain with the kind of technologies we've had, given the growing population. So, for example, if you look at National Water and Sewerage Corporation and the challenges it is facing to give us water for our close to 50 million people, it's very difficult. They need different technologies, they need different designs, they need different chlorinating methods because of the human activity. All the garbage that goes to Lake Victoria increases the costs of making the water pure and clean. So in order for us to do all this, we need to sit together. First of all, we are not also doing this just in isolation. Let's look at the impact water, sanitation, and climate change has on the women, on the girls. Because women and girls are the ones who are really mandated traditionally to cater for water and sanitation. So if you do not provide the basic water supply, sustainable water sources that will stand climate change, it impacts very negatively on the women and girls. So that is why we are saying, as policy makers, as decision makers, how can decisions that really influence the lives of women and children be catered for? All these are resources that we are talking about. All this is money. All this is sensitization that is required.
It is you who talked about everybody playing their role. What is the role, or what would be the role of the private sector in this?
Yeah, the private sector, we've known the private sector to be business-oriented. They always come up with new technologies.
Honorable talked about emissions. They are the ones in the industrialization and whatever.
Yes, they are, but you know what we know.
They're the ones that own factories,
yes,
wetlands.
Yes, we have what we call a catchment area. So in a catchment area, you'll find the communities, you'll find the private sector, you'll find the district local government, you'll find all the leaders. So what within a catchment management plan, what is being done by the Ministry of Water and Environment is to bring together all these stakeholders. And we discuss to really know if it is Coca-Cola what is their role in destroying the environment, and what do they need to do to make sure that they don't discharge waste into our people's gardens, into our roads and all that. Okay. So what needs to be done is for government, for the private sector, for the NGOs to come and support, for example, the catchment management approach. Because everyone is in the catchment. What happens upstream will affect someone downstream. So it's an entire catchment. The private sector is not operating in isolation.
Yes.
So that is why we need policies that really educate all of us to really know what we are doing right and what we are not doing well. But all this requires money, it requires coordination, it requires collaboration, innovation, so that we really come up with those different ways, methods and approaches that will help us to really address the issues on the ground. And in order for us to do this, we have to really look at the social aspect. We are talking about people. We are talking about mindset change. We are talking about actions that need to be done. We are talking about the environment which we are interacting with on a daily basis. How are we really holding ourselves accountable on the conservation of the environment? We are talking about governance. Governance is so wide, but it really calls for the policies put in place. Are they the right policies? And if they're the right policies, how are they disseminated? And if they are disseminated, are there funds for people to be able to really put into action what the policy guidelines say? And that is why we need such forum that like the upcoming talks on climate change, so that we can be able as a country to be responsible, to be held accountable as a nation, as Africa, as to whether we are really working towards attaining the Sustainable Development Goals.
Honorable, the young people, it is your voice that will sink into their minds. What is their role in this, and how can we support their initiatives? If you have, I know you know our schools, even in the constituency back at home, those clubs are there, the climate clubs, environmental clubs, but poor girls and boys may just end there. How can we support these initiatives from their level, so that they, by the time somebody becomes 25 at university, they know the value of not throwing a bottle? These are things that teachers tell them, but the ideas die there. So what are their roles, and how can we support them?
Okay, thank you so much, Jordan. Yesterday we had a symposium in Makerere University with young people, but the symposium was more focused on youth adaptation forum.
Yes.
A forum of young people, because there is a belief that in whatever we plan, we must plan for the future, for now and for the future.
Definitely.
So that's why this forum was convened, and on Sunday we'll also interface with our different students from the various universities in Makerere. And our aim is, this is a precursor to the climate talks that are going to take place from 7th and 8th, but also the Sustainable Development Goals Forum, 11th Sustainable Development Goals Forum, that's going to take place officially being opened by almost, there will be 5 heads of states on the 9th to the 11th.
Okay. But
all these activities that we do are a build up to the main, what will be called the Kampala Declaration. Aware that the young people play a critical role, the women play a critical role, because when we're talking about climate change and gender, the impact is huge on the different genders, but on women it's even worse. In my village, when there's no food in the table, it's a woman who walks a long distance to look for water.
Okay.
And the man probably will just decide to sit, because those are gender roles that have been kind of like attached to particular genders. So when you analyze climate change and gender, it's huge. But when you look at the SDGs for this 11th Forum on Sustainable Development Goals, this is a forum that's going to come up with a declaration for the whole of Africa. And it shall be called the Kampala Declaration. And then, on behalf of the Africa continent, the leaders who will be selected in that forum will now present our views at the annual gathering in New York, where the different continents will be presenting their continental outcomes in terms of shaping and addressing the key SDGs that are being highlighted this year. But if you realize we have 3 SDGs, there's this year, every year, the Sustainable Development Goal, the UN Secretariat decides on particular SDGs. And for this year, we are talking about good health, that's SDG 3. We are talking about SDG 5, which is gender equality. And we're talking about decent work, that's SDG 8. And we're talking about life below water and partnerships for the global goals. Those are the focus of this year's SDGs. However, when you look at issues of WASH, when you look at issues of climate change, you cannot talk about gender equality without talking about these issues. You cannot talk about life underwater without talking about climate change. You cannot talk about partnership for the global goals when the main challenge that we have globally. We did a survey for IPU, Interparliamentary Union, global. And one of the sampling from the different parliamentarians across the globe, everyone, they were telling you to mention at least 5 challenges that you're facing in the community. So almost all parliamentarians mentioned, first challenge was climate change. Whether Europe, whether Africa, whether US, whether South America. So that means that is one of the key areas that we must tackle. So whether youth, whether women, whether elderly, climate change affects all of us.
Okay.
But we think that to shape the future, the young people, including children, must be engaged so that they are able to shape the future that we want as a continent or as a country or as a region. In terms of changing their attitude, we are talking about eco-friendly entrepreneurship for young people. We are talking about people, because really right now we are talking about 77% of young, Uganda being one of the youngest population, with 77% young people from the ages of probably 0 to 40. So that is a very productive age group. You cannot discuss anything else without bringing on board those young people. That's why in this climate talks preceding, we'll have the talks with the students from the different universities, because these are the people who are going to occupy the different spaces tomorrow.
Yes.
Some could, like I came to Parliament when I was just from university. So, and I'm in the table right now. So that means those young people will be the civil society experts, they will be the members of parliament, there will be the lawyers legislating on issues of carbon credits, on issues of climate laws in Africa. So that means if we don't target them, then we are at a loss. But most importantly, they will be the ones to influence the communities in terms of how do we reshape the continent. That's why young people remain very imperative in not only in climate discussions, but in everything that we do.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add a few points about the young people. I think it's you, the media, who keep on saying Africa's youth are not just the future of climate action. They are actually already leading on it. And we've seen the different initiatives. The youth are our greatest asset. And they will take over, as Honorable has said. They are already leading in a number of innovations.
Yes.
We have the technology issues around, yeah? We have information technology. We have the artificial intelligence. All these things are here with us. So we really need to get the youth to invest in them, to invest in climate education, to invest in their mentorship, yeah? Preparing them for their work ahead. Yeah, so it's like they have to start now. We have to create all these platforms, as Honorable has said. Let's look out for the youth wherever they are, so that we can really use this asset to make sure that we use the digital tools. We can no longer rely on systems, the traditional systems to detect early warning systems. we need digital tools, and the youth are the best placed to really enable us to be able to address all these issues on water, sanitation technologies, issues on climate action technologies.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies. We are winding up, but I want just some more light on the Africa talks, Africa climate talks and the SDGs. I think Mrs. Magala will give us the SDGs, the upcoming event, and Honorable will comment about the Africa climate talks as we wind up. Let me start with you, Mrs. Magala.
Okay, thank you very much. For me, I think as Africa prepares for the 6th climate talks, we really need to ask ourselves, are we building systems that are really climate resilient? And here I'm talking about so many different systems, our governance systems, our WASH systems, the systems that address gender, education, the systems that address employment. Are we building sustainable systems, and are all these systems putting into consideration the climate actions that we really need to do? So for me, I think without the climate resilient actions, we will not really be able to meet the SDGs by 2030. So I call upon all our negotiators, all the participants, to make sure that climate action is really at the center of all the different development initiatives that we are working on.
Thank you so much. Honorable, when are we holding the 6th Africa Climate Talks and the SDGs Forum?
Okay, so the 6th Africa Climate Talks is one of the events that will be preceding the main SDG Forum. And it shall be held on the 7th to the 8th in Munyonyo.
Okay.
Already we expect participants from different countries of Africa, over 200 participants. And aware that Africa has been participating in the negotiations in regards to the UNFCCC, United Nations Conference of Parties on Climate Change. There are some action areas that we came up with as a continent, but when we met globally, we achieved others and we did not achieve majority. So we will be reviewing the previous conference of party that was held in Azerbaijan as we head to COP30 in schedule for Brazil. And then also we are in a way going to discuss the Africa Climate Summit that is scheduled for Addis in regards to what do we anticipate when we go to Brazil. So the talks will start here, but most importantly, the outcome of the Africa Climate Talks and the SDG Forum will build into the Kampala Declaration that shall be discussed during the annual UN meeting of the different leaders of the globe. Okay. So for me, that's very imperative. And yeah, so basically, we will have policymakers, we will have experts, we will have civil society organizations, we will have the academia, and the different private sector. But this is just one of the events that's going to take place in Uganda. We have other forums that will be preceding the Sustainable Development Goals Forum, the 11th Sustainable, although this will be the 6th Climate Talks, but this will be the 11th Regional Forum on Sustainable Development Goals, because other forums have been held in the different countries, including Zimbabwe, Addis Ababa, but last year, Uganda bidded through the Prime Minister, and that's why we are able to host this event here. So we look forward to a wonderful debate when visitors are in Uganda, because we'll have over 5,000 guests in Uganda, and hopefully the outcome of the Kampala Declaration will be implementable to enable the African people progress in regards to addressing the Sustainable Development Goals, probably by 2030, and aligning it to the African Union Agenda 2063, if we will get there. But even if we don't get there, at least we would have reached a certain extent as a continent. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome, the Honorable Amongin Jacqueline, a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, and Mrs. Joyce Mpala Nyimagala, the country director of Water Aid Uganda. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming in and all the information we have shared here. To you watching, that is all we had for you. This special discussion was brought to you by the African Network of Parliamentarians on Climate Change, the East African Legislative Assembly in collaboration with the Office of the Prime Minister and the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on SDGs, with support from Water Aid. My name is Michael Jordan Lukoma. On behalf of the whole team here, wish you the best of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Program My School, a great students program and your answer to education perspective, giving you reason as to why you should pay school fees for your child's education, with items like students' talents, thoughts, adventures and skills showcased, leadership skills and all other activities plus concerns in various schools in your locations. Remember that our children are our future generation. Don't miss Program My School.
Okwongera okuyiga ebikwata ku musolo n'okubisembereza abagusasula. Bannayuganda bangi balina ebibuuzo ebikwata ku musolo gwe basasula eri ekitongole ekiwooza URA.
When we come at revenue, they tell us to clear Kitenge at 10,000.